Zambia, and I will be your moderator, so you can just call me Lady Muzo. And please let us send our introductions. You tell us your full names, the country you're coming from, and how you're feeling today. Just tell us your name, the country, and where you're coming from. So let us utilize the chat box. For those that may not be so familiar with Zoom, you can see the 3 dots at the far right, just before the leave button. You click on them and then you see the chat. So once you click on chat, you're able to utilize that. Okay, and let us remember to unmute when we're about to speak. Also mute if we are not the ones speaking, to avoid the challenge of disturbing the person speaking. Otherwise, you're all welcome. Glad to have you here. I'm excited to be with you today. I hope you're equally excited for the discussion that we are having today. I can see a Mentimeter has been shared already in the chat. So being that it has been shared already, we can just have it. Let us respond to the few questions that we have there. So in the chat, we have the Mentimeter that we can all just respond to. We just want to understand what you know about climate justice and reproductive health. It's okay if you don't know, if you know something, but don't stress. It's just a short exercise to understand who's in the room. Okay, so let's start clicking on that Mentimeter, everyone, and just give our insights. We're going to take just 3 minutes to do that. And if you're just joining us, know that you have not missed a lot of things. We're just getting started, actually. Thank you. Let's have the Mentimeter responses. This is lovely. Burkina Faso, we have Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Nigeria is in the house, South Africa. Okay. I see powerful. I'm like, okay. Thank you. Keep the responses coming. Recording in progress. Sorry for that. So as we do that, if you have time, do share the link so that we have more participants coming through, so that many of our colleagues may also learn from this particular webinar. Okay, so now we want to understand the age groups that are in the house. We have those between 26 and 30, which is leading at the moment. We have the 20 to 25. We have above 35, 20 to 25 is almost percent 26 to 30. Let's see. Ooh, all right. That's lovely. We are competing here. No one is below 20. We don't have the adolescents in the house. Okay, so this webinar is for everybody else. Everyone is going to be participating. I like the comment in the chat to say below 20 might be at school. Lovely. Okay. So does climate change impact my reproductive health? We want to know if yes, no. If you're not sure, maybe. So does climate change impact your reproductive health? What do you think? Yes, no, maybe. We have the maybes, the yes. Keep the responses coming. Okay, so yeah, and if you can't utilize Mentimeter, maybe you're having challenges, you can send in the chat. So if you're having that challenge, just send in the chat. Okay, maybe we can go to the next question. We have the majority saying yes. So now, how? How does climate change impact your reproductive health? Just be as brief. You can say, no, let me not give answers or examples, but how? Just keep it brief. Those that said yes, or those that were not sure, you can give us why you're not sure. How do you think climate change affects your reproductive health? Okay, increase of temperature, yeah. What else? Do not stress. Don't overthink it. Just anything you've ever thought of when you think about climate change. And maybe I'm in a place where we experience floods. What happens to my health? Okay, when I'm in a place where there is drought, what happens? As a young person, as an older youth, there's reduced in my accessibility. Yeah, that could be in terms of accessibility to the centers, health facilities. Okay, I can see limited contraceptives. Okay, let's keep them coming. Okay, if you cannot use Mentimeter, remember that you can as well just text in the chat. We'll be able to see that. So the question here, in case you're just joining us, we are on Mentimeter, getting the insights of what you think in relation to reproductive health and climate change. Okay, thank you for those responses. I can see early marriages is there too. So now we'll just dive into the discussion. Thank you so much for participating, everybody else. Please be here with us. If you're just joining us, you've not missed much. That is when we are getting started with the body of the discussion today. So just to give a background, some of you may know that the Eastern and Southern Africa region counts for the largest share of the global burden when it comes to HIV among young people, and some of the highest rates of adolescent pregnancy. Much progress has been made in the HIV and sexual reproductive health rights response. However, despite being recognized as a priority, adolescents and young people continue to be left out. We are learning that AIDS is still the #1 cause of death of adolescents in the 12 countries, which is in East and Southern Africa. And almost 6 times as many adolescents were newly infected with HIV than adolescent boys. Over 1 in 4 young women give birth before age 18 in our region. 1 in 3 girls is still getting married by age 18. And almost 1 in 6 young women experience gender-based violence, which just means that there's still much work that we need to do. So as part of the united efforts to accelerate youth-led HIV and sexual reproductive health response, in 2023, we provided a platform for young leaders across the region to advocate and advance youth priorities towards access to HIV and AIDS services. The network's main objective has been to incur and accelerating youth-led and HIV response commitments and collectively work together to address the persisting health and developmental changes in the region. For those that are not aware, United Movement is convened by AFRIAN and Y+ Global, being supported by the UN agencies. And our aim is to build on advocacy and leadership through youth-led responses. So as part of efforts to strengthen the United Steering Committee launched this series of capacity building webinars with topics chosen through the survey. Some of you participated in it. If you're attending this webinar for the first time, do note that the discussions that we are having were actually suggested by our members, the United members. So if you're thinking, oh, but I'm not part of it, do not worry. You'll be part of us, and you're already part of us. So they suggested this kind of discussions. This being the second one, the first was about mental health and psychosocial support. So thank you so much all for joining this webinar, the second one. Remember that it's a series, so we'll be having more discussions like this ones. So to get started in understanding what we are discussing today, allow us to have Peace Umana, who's from International Youth Alliance for Family Planning, who's a young sexual reproductive health and rights advocate from Nigeria. She's working as communications director with a background in psychology and master's in public health. She has been recognized for her works with various awards, and as a communications director, she advocates for young people's health and rights through digital campaigns, on social media platforms, and in her community. She also volunteers with UNFPA Nigeria to support young people's development. All right, so we're going to have Peace to just take us an overview, make us understand climate justice and reproductive health for youth-led climate change and the Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights Declaration. Please, Peace, over to you. Good afternoon.
Hi, Masonda. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be part of the discussion today, just presenting. And I don't know if you want to share the slides, or I can go ahead and share from my end. So let me share my screen. Please, Masonda, can you see my screen? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see your screen and we can hear you. But I would suggest that maybe for while you're presenting, you can turn on the video so that we can get you properly.
Okay, yes, I have turned it on.
You can turn it off just for us to hear you properly. I think there's a glitch.
Okay, so yes, I've turned that off. And when we hear of climate justice and SRHR, you might be wondering how climate affects our health and if it's actually a thing. Because I know there are people who feel like, oh, climate does not affect our health or it's just in our minds. But I tell you that it's an actual thing. And to let you know more about us at IYAFP, this would be our agenda. We are US, but we work across the global south. So we are just registered in the US because the US was the, should I say, the most easiest, and in terms of human rights, it advances human rights much more than we think. So we registered in the US, but we work across the global south. We work through a network of young human rights defenders focused on advancing sexual and reproductive health rights. And we do this through a membership program, which is the highlight of IYAFP. So we have members across more than 30 countries across the globe. Most of them are situated in Africa, but we also have in Asia. Our work focuses on advancing sex that includes safe abortion. We have different projects ranging from We Trust Youth, which is, I don't know if you have heard of the Global Roadmap for Action. It's still another group or network where young people come together to talk about the needs of young people in family planning. And then we also work on climate and family planning, which document. And these projects are carried out across different countries through our members. We have members in different countries. So if we want to implement a project, we reach out to them and we say, oh, we are hosting this, or we have this project that would love to fund. Are you interested? And then we work with them. We also operate as fiscal sponsors for our member organizations. So the thing with youth-led organizations, especially community-led organizations, we know that securing funding might be a lot when it comes to getting funding from foreign donors or foreign organizations. So we act as the fiscal sponsors. So if an outside funder, like a global funder, wants to fund a community, but they might not have like a US account or a foreign account, we can act as that middle ground where we get the funds and we give it to these member organizations. That way they don't lose out on that opportunity or on that funding. So like I said, we worked on climate and family planning, and we had a vision to work on a youth declaration. What actually started it was we had discussions with ourselves and with our members. So we conducted 3 consultations, which were done in English, French, and in Spanish. So we asked young people what they think climate does to their health and how they can share their experiences around climate change, climate justice, sexual and reproductive health. So our members across these 3 different countries in English, French, and Spanish also got other young people that they spoke with, did a consultation, and we all compiled the results. Based on all the inputs received from young people, we drafted a youth declaration, we edited it, and we also published it on our website. One of the things we also did was to launch it at COP28, which is the Conference of Parties for Health. We launched it during December last year, where we also had the opportunity to share our ideas with other people who were there. One thing we also noticed was that there were hardly events that focused on the intersection of climate and health. Most events were about temperatures, degree, the climate things that they actually focus on. So we hardly saw intersection of SRHR. So we saw that we had to continue advocating and amplifying this youth declaration. The event was very pivotal for us in terms of talking about it, in terms of bringing it more to the audience, because I think as we keep pushing for it, we make more people aware of how climate affects our health. And the next steps, we want to also continue talking about it at Summit of the Future. We will be hosting a side event that will focus on fostering partnerships and solidarity among advocates working on reproductive health and climate justice. So we don't just want to stop at publishing it or at launching it. We want to keep on talking about it. We want to present that opportunity for leaders to hear what young people have to say. And we are envisioning maybe a future where the government would adopt that document and maybe it can be translated into different languages to suit those communities, so that young people can also push for grow bigger than what we have now. We just hope to keep pushing it, and we hope to keep advancing the document. And if you would be at Summit of the Future, we'd love to invite you to where you can get the presentation as a whole. And I also drop the link to an actual thing. It's actually happening when people face flooding, when people face drought, they are forced to migrate. And when they migrate, they are forced into harsh conditions, and they have to look for things or ways to get out of it. And that's why maybe a family who is poor, who is hungry, they don't mind selling their daughter or selling their child to older men. And those men marry off their young children, and those young girls give birth, and it can be the leading cause of maternal death. It can be the leading cause of reproductive issues for them. It can even be another cause of unsafe abortion. So these are the issues that young people face, and I hope we can keep pushing for a fair and a world of justice. Thank you so much. Over to you, Musunda.
Thank you so much, Peace, for that brief background and making us understand that reproductive health is something that was not being discussed comprehensively in some of these discussions. That is why it's important to have young people being part of these discussions. And just from this presentation, we're going to get into a panel discussion where we hear from our panelists and just hear their insights in detail around their works and how we relate this reproductive health and climate justice. So on the panel today, we have 4 amazing young people. We have Patricia, we have John, Molly, and Nuhu that will be making us understand few perspectives around the discussion today. And we're going to start with Patricia, then we'll have John, Molly, and Nuhu in that order. So Patricia is actually a passionate advocate for people with disabilities, focusing on HIV and reproductive health, mental health, and climate justice. She's actually currently completing her master's in environmental change and management at the University of Oxford, where her research is primarily on climate justice, particularly for women and persons with disabilities. She also holds a first-class honors degree in analytical chemistry from Multimedia University of Kenya. So before joining Oxford, she served as a vice chairperson of the UNFPA Youth Advisory Board and is a former coordinator of the Global Network of Young Persons with Disability. Her advocacy is driven by personal experiences as a young person with a disability, with a focus to address social inequalities, particularly in the context of Africa's climate crisis. So that is Patricia, who will be speaking to now. And her question is, how can we ensure that there is representation and inclusion of young people with disabilities in climate change advocacy while addressing their diverse needs and the interests of the majority? Patricia, good afternoon, and over to you.
Thank you, Led Muzo. So far, the discussions have been amazing, and I really look forward to this conversation because it speaks to what I'm doing and what I love doing. So to answer your question, how we understand climate justice. So climate justice has 3 angles. That is the distributional factor, recognitional factor, and the procedural factor. So when you talk about the distributional factor, we think about who are most impacted by the climate change, who are most neglected when it comes to climate change. And for this context, of course, it's going to be persons with disabilities who are mostly left behind when it comes to impacts of climate change. Then when it comes to recognitional factor of climate justice is whose voice is heard and respected and listened to. So over and over, when it comes to issues of persons with disabilities, hardly are they involved on conversations that really matter to them. Something as important as climate change, which because of their specific impairments and barriers in the society, such as stigma, or even the physical barriers that are around, persons with disabilities are mostly neglected and their voice is never heard. For example, in COP28, just as our previous speaker has mentioned, there are certain conversations that are not included and there are certain populations that are not included. And hardly will you meet young people with disabilities in such big events such as COP28 or any events that involve promotion of strategies or policies in relation to persons with disabilities. Then on the procedural factor around climate justice is how decisions made and by whom. So for this angle, you meet that decisions when it comes to climate change, of course, they're being made. We have COP28, we had the African conference that happened in Nairobi, but who is making these decisions and for whom? So they'll probably think, okay, we're making these decisions for the better part of the society, or in Africa, we have young people. But again, they fail to understand that young people is a very diverse group and we have also persons with disabilities. So again, we don't have the voices of young persons with disabilities in such important conversations, and therefore it leads to the organizations or the government or even NGOs, CSOs coming up with solutions that are actually not meeting the needs of persons with disabilities. So when it comes to speaking about climate change, there are three things that persons with disabilities will have to go through. There is the aspects of before the disasters, during the disasters, and after the disasters. For example, before, during the disasters, the climatic disasters, most persons with disabilities will lack the urgent information. For example, we had the El Nino in Kenya and the floods that happened in around April and May. But again, you'd wonder, this information, probably it was able to get to some certain communities, people who are privileged to have such kind of access. But there are certain groups of persons with disabilities who did not get this information as early as possible, and therefore it made them more vulnerable when the climate impacts came, and therefore probably most of them lost their lives in the process and had so many other inconveniences caused to their lives because of just negligence of how they were involved before the disasters. Then during the disasters, we have issues such as ease of accessibility to evacuation centers and transportation or getting to safer shelters. So for persons with disabilities, say, for example, they had the privilege of getting the information before, for example, let's say, but again, it's how the systems and the infrastructures that are made for them that are not accessible to them. So as much as they have yes the information, but then they face huge barriers and blockages such as accessible routes or even accessible means to get to the shelters, and therefore you find them stranded in the disasters and making them become more vulnerable and them losing their lives. And in the process, other things do happen. For example, exposure to rape circumstances. I'll give an example. When we had back then in Kenya around 2007, we had the post-violence elections, or let's even talk about the recent Maandamano that we had. During such kind of protests, often people or women, the vulnerable groups, are mostly exposed to these kind of violences. So you can't imagine on a situation such as a climate change, in a situation such as a flood or drought circumstances, and we have people who are stranded because they can't get help or support, and therefore because of the vulnerability, people get to misuse them and get to violate their rights. So after the disasters, we have the issues now of, say they have gotten to those safe spaces or they did not get to those safe spaces, then there's the issue of having proper housing or even access to food, water, and medical care. So again, in these after disasters, it makes them again more vulnerable because, say for example, if somebody has been using the HIV drugs and they need to continue with their medication, or they need access to nutritious food because their drugs are quite strong. And so when we have these aftermaths of the disasters, there's that disruption in terms of food, adequate food and proper water or clean water and even education. Therefore, it's really hard for them to continue with what they were doing before in sustaining their lives. So it's hard for them to get access to medication. Then again, you find that in the process, some people had lost their assistive devices while they are, trying to save their lives during the disasters. So these are kind of the things that persons with disabilities experience before, during, and after. And again, what makes the situation more vulnerable is the fact that during this kind of disasters, there's always that shift in terms of funding because people want to act quick on what they can see at that moment. So a good example is during the COVID pandemic, when we had when the pandemic came, we had shift of funds go all the way to supporting the pandemic, but people forgot that there's also needs of persons with disabilities who require medication. For example, people with neurodivergent conditions who require medications day in, day out, for that they can still continue acting at least in a manner that works to the society. Then also during that time, we had seen there was lots of efforts gone to providing contraceptives for different populations. So that was a barrier. So to answer the question, how can we include persons with disabilities in such conversations of climate justice? So for me, I would say we need to have equal representations of persons with disabilities through the right mainstreaming. And the keyword here is right mainstreaming, because there often are times where people will decide to bring in persons with disabilities into the conversation, but they'll fail to meet up to the standards of meeting the needs of persons with disabilities, which we basically call them reasonable accommodation. So reasonable accommodation is something that you need to put so that a person with a disability can act almost to the same level as somebody who does not have a disability. For example, if somebody requires sign language interpretation, then you have to ensure that when they're attending such kind of conversations, there is that reasonable accommodation or adjustment that is made for them. If you're having a conversation in a building, then you have to ensure that that building has accessible means for everyone involved in the conversation. Then you also have to ensure that there is inclusive financing when it comes to green climatic projects. For example, it has to be both inclusively and exclusively. Inclusively, it means that if you're mainstreaming the needs of persons with disabilities into your projects, for example, sexual and reproductive health rights and disability, then you have to ensure that there's funds that are meant for just this specific purpose, and we have the right people involved in that conversations. Alternatively, then you can ensure that you have funds that are just meant to meet the needs of persons with different disabilities, because again, disability is a very large group, and therefore meeting the needs of this group, it will not be effective if you just have one person representing all. We have very diverse needs of persons with disabilities, and they all react differently when it comes to climate change. And therefore, we have to ensure that there's equal representation, inclusive financing, and of course, the right way of passing climate information, because as you already know, matters of climate justice, they are not well known, or it's how they are put to the public that they're not put in a manner that is understood by all. Therefore, we have to ensure that even the climate information is as inclusive and as is open as possible. Well, thank you so much, Lady Musonda.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for that comprehensive explanation. I love how you just made us understand the process from before, during, and after, to say this is a whole process that is taking place for persons with disability that we need to consider when bringing interventions. Amazing. Thank you so much. Please, if you're just joining us, be here with us and be part of the discussion. If you have any contributions, you can utilize the chat box, send in your comments, your contributions, anything, so that while they speak, we can also be engaging on the other side. Now we're going to get a perspective from John Chipango, who is actually working closely with communities. He is a passionate advocate for sexual reproductive health and climate justice. He's dedicated to amplifying the voice of young people in Zambia. He's a UNESCO Youth Climate Change Ambassador and UNICEF Digital Mobilizer. With a strong belief in the power of storytelling, he aspires to become a journalist, shedding light on the intersection of sexual reproductive health and rights, climate change, and local governance. So, John, your question would be then, how effective is advocacy through storytelling at the local and national level compared to advocacy focused primarily on the international or regional levels? John, good afternoon, and over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. I hopefully I'm audible enough. I was facing some network challenges earlier, so yeah.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. So going back to your question, for me, I personally do believe that advocacy through storytelling can be highly effective at both local and national or regional, both local and international levels. But in different levels. So the local and national level storytelling advocacy can create a sense of ownership, a sense of involvement within the communities, and also drive long-term sustainability in terms of how people can approach climate change and also sexual reproductive health rights and HIV. While at an international level or a regional level, it builds solidarity among nations, among different communities. It brings different diverse of people. So you can tell from that advocacy is effective on both local and international levels. So just to give an example of how advocacy can really be effective at all those local and national level, local or national or regional level is, for example, the storytelling of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign in Nigeria, which started as a national cry or a national advocacy with the aim of ensuring those girls are brought back. You know, girls really go through a lot. And when you remember during that time, a lot of young women were captured. So it started from a local advocate to something which went international when the international community stood in solidarity to Nigeria. I would also like to bring into light, as I conclude my my answer to this interesting webinar, is the fact that our country, Zambia, Musonda, as you may be aware, we are currently facing a drought, and this drought is affecting areas. Those are affected areas where young girls and men are doing transactional sex. So at the end of the day, with the right approach to storytelling, we can empower these young girls and men to protect their bodies and have a voice on their issues that are affecting them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, John, for that brief explanation. I love the fact you said the storytelling creates a sense of belonging. Everybody is able to relate because it's a context that we are all familiar with. If you're going to tell a story at community or national level, many of people are going to understand and relate. And the example you've given, young people with the understanding of storytelling can then start to talk about the different issues that they are facing. Okay, thank you so much. So now we'll get another perspective from Molly. Molly is dedicated, he's a dedicated activist, and she's an entrepreneur championing universal health access, particularly sexual and reproductive rights for diverse youths globally. She's a consultant, climate justice, and also participated in the declaration that we heard about earlier from Peace. And she's attended high-level meetings, also task forces. She leverages her expertise in digital advocacy, content creation, design, and project management to drive positive change. Her commitment to continuous learning, both academic and self-taught, fuels her innovative approach to data analysis, reporting, and decision-making, ultimately contributing to a more equitable and just world for young people. Molly, your question is, how can we effectively use digital advocacy strategies to engage and support young people? And what is the significance of tailoring our messages across various digital platforms? Molly, good afternoon and over to you.
Hello, good afternoon to you here this morning from me from Guatemala. I'm so excited to be here. I hope that you can hear me, just to confirm that you can hear me.
Yes, please, we can hear you. And just before you continue, allow me to state that we have interpretations, please, to our colleagues, Portuguese and French. I'm sorry, I'm saying this very late, but we have interpretations. Go to your far right on the dots. When you click on it, it has got different options. You see a part saying interpretations, then you're able to listen into your preferred language. Thank you so much. Sorry for that, Molly. Please go ahead.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Okay. So let's start with my intervention. First, I'm so excited to be here. And of course, I want that first to share this message that in our increasingly interconnected world, the power of digital advocacy is limitless. So we first need to understand our reality and our context. And while 95% of youth in developed countries are online, only 65% in developing nations have this access, sorry. Our challenge is close this gap and empower every youth voice. So for do this, it's critical to understand that our smartphones is an extension of ourselves. So let's leverage platform like TikTok, Instagram, or whatever platform you like to use to create human rights campaign. And imagine that this can go in viral in a second. But in rural areas, we need to think and we need to be more creative for the limit access to the internet. So for example, we can first create WhatsApp, use the website as our megaphone and sharing dollar infographic and inspired podcasts. Imagine mostly digital festivals in village square where use a dollar knowledge and at the speed of a click. So also too, we need to recognize that it's important who can be a good alliance that can support us to do and to transmit this message specifically in the communities or in our communities too. Depend where are we right now. So the other aspect we need to think about and the other scenario that we need to think about, it would be, for example, the communities that are affected by the climate crisis. So first we need to build a resilient communication system using solar power devices and offline cable apps. And let's try and look at use the digital first responder documented and sharing in real time the climate impact. That is really soon. That's the now the opportunity that we have with the internet. We can be connected on real time, and also if we can use our for example our campaign, our social media, share the lives and know that what is happening. The world can know well what is the reality that we're living, and also to how can we can make a call for all the population for that communities that are affected. So another thing is that let's not forget to tailor our message to each platform and community. While urban youth might unite around clever memes, rural areas may resonate more with local stories told through voices, notes. 73% of young people want to organize to take a stand, and let's be the voice in every format and language. So campaigns with user-generated content see 50% higher engagement. We must not only reach young people, but also amplify our voices from city skyscraper to remote hills. Let's hand over the digital microphone and watch us use creativity in this global challenge. Every digital action, whatever it's like or a share, has a global impact. Young people with our unique perspective and wondrous energy, we have the power to rewrite narrative and paint brighter future. So I challenge you, be bold your posts, brave in your tweets, relentless in your digital advocacy, because in this vast ocean of internet, your voice is just not a drop. It is a way of change. And together, let's turn likes into love, shares into solidarity, and clicks into heartbeats of global change. The world is listening. So what would you say? Thank you.
The world is listening is what I'm getting from that amazing presentation. She says the world is listening. So she challenges us to utilize social media, our digital platforms, to speak out. She says we also need to involve young people, the youths in our communities, to generate content, because then we create more engagement. She also stated that when you utilize digital platforms, you're speaking to the global community, you're creating global impact. Thank you so much for that, Molly. And now for our last speaker, before we get into the questions from the participants, we have Nuhu, who is a youth delegate to COP29, who's going to be speaking to us. And he is a geographer by training. He holds a master's degree in climate change, biodiversity, and ecosystems service with a focus on science policy practice interfaces. He is also a climate activist involved in several youth-led organizations focusing on the climate, biodiversity, agriculture, WASH, gender nexus. He is a member of the UNFPA Joint Youth Working Group on Sexual Reproductive Health and Rights. And as I highlighted, is also one of the UNFPA's youth delegates to COP 28. It should be 28. Yeah, thank you so much. So let's get Nuhu. And your question is, as a delegate, how do you envision young people influencing the development and implementation of policies to empower them, particularly in the context of climate change crisis? Nuhu, good afternoon and over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the floor. I will be speaking in French, my first language, where I'm more comfortable. So let's go to interpretation.
That's okay.
Fine. Ok, pour mon intervention sur la question sur comment, en tant que jeune délégué, comment j'envisage que les jeunes puissent influencer les décisions pour la mise en œuvre des politiques. Je vais m'attarder sur 4 points essentiels. Le premier sera le pouvoir des jeunes à travers les solutions innovantes. Le deuxième point va plus s'attarder sur le plaidoyer, comment travailler à ce que les jeunes puissent être pris en compte dans l'élaboration des politiques. Et le troisième point sera plus ou moins sur les questions de renforcement des capacités, sur les questions de santé sexuelle et reproductive et climat. Et le quatrième point sera comment réduire ce gap intergénérationnel entre les jeunes et une autre génération qui ont le lead actuellement. Et comme on le dit, les jeunes sont les acteurs de demain. Sur les questions sur le premier point, il faut noter que les jeunes sont des catalyseurs à travers des solutions innovantes. Et à travers les 3 panélistes qui sont déjà passés, on voit Peace Oumana qui fait du bon boulot. Et elle est plus focus sur les questions des personnes handicapées qui sont plus ou moins restées en marge. Et on a Patricia aussi à travers les mouvements aussi qui essaie de briguer ce gap entre climat et santé sexuelle et reproductive, où elle travaille déjà sur les politiques à travers l'élaboration des documents stratégiques et où elle veut que les jeunes puissent être partie prenante et voir comment les gouvernements peuvent plus ou moins adopter ces déclarations. Et dernièrement, on a Molly, qui utilise le digital. Et comme vous savez, quand on parle de jeunes, les solutions pratiques et évolutives, nous les maîtrisons bien, surtout les réseaux sociaux. Même si, comme elle a noté, ne sont pas trop accessibles en milieu rural, mais néanmoins, on peut utiliser ces réseaux sociaux pour s'informer sur les questions de climat et de santé sexuelle reproductive. Donc, c'est l'un des instruments que nous, les jeunes, nous maîtrisons, qu'on peut utiliser pour faciliter les politiques allant dans ce sens. Le deuxième point, c'est l'inclusion dans le plaidoyer des politiques. Il faut noter que nous, les jeunes, dans la majeure partie des questions, que ce soit des questions, à part les questions climatiques, santé sexuelle et reproductive, nous ne sommes pas pris en compte. Ou bien, quand on parle de prise en compte, c'est peut-être nous sommes invités juste au lancement et à la validation de ces documents stratégiques. Mais il faut noter qu'il y a du boulot à faire pour que nous, jeunes, on puisse être partie prenante du processus de décision de ces politiques-là. Et comme on le fait au niveau des COP, il faut savoir qu'au niveau de la COP climat, puisqu'on a 3 COP de la Convention de Rio, ou au niveau de chaque COP, quand on prend la COP climat, il y a Yungo qui est là, qui est l'organe des jeunes, où au niveau local, les jeunes mènent des réflexions sur les questions climatiques et ensuite ça se mène au niveau régional et au niveau global. Avant la COP, voilà, on a des décisions au niveau global pour les jeunes. Donc, sur ces documents de plaidoyer-là, en tant que jeunes qui maîtrisons plus ou moins ces questions de santé sexuelle et reproductive, là, nous devions travailler, faire les plaidoyers pour la prise en compte de ces questions qui ne sont pas trop en vogue pour qu'ils puissent être intégrés dans les politiques, surtout lors des négociations climat. Le troisième point, c'est la question de renforcement de capacité. On est en train de parler, mais pour mieux comprendre, pour mieux influencer les politiques, il faut qu'en tant que jeune, d'abord, on puisse maîtriser ces questions-là, ces questions de climat, ces questions de santé sexuelle et reproductive, c'est les intersections. Donc, il nous faut avoir accès, voilà, à l'éducation. Et cela se fait individuellement. Il y a des webinaires en ligne qu'il faut suivre comme celle-ci pour avoir des notions. Il y a des cours en ligne, des MOOC gratuits en ligne. Comme en tant que structure de jeunes aussi, on peut organiser des sessions de renforcement des capacités et inviter des experts qui vont venir capaciter les jeunes pour qu'on ait plus la connaissance. Et cela va développer en nous le leadership, voilà, en termes de plaidoyer et d'action climatique. Et une fois qu'on est plus outillé en plaidoyer, en négociation, en tant que jeune, on peut faire facilement passer nos priorités. La dernière question, c'est la collaboration intergénérationnelle. Il faut noter que nous sommes là en tant que jeunes, mais une génération qui est là, qui ont l'expérience. Ils ont l'expérience, mais nous, en tant que jeunes, nous avons aussi l'esprit d'innovation. Donc, entre autres, voilà, et en apprenant de cette génération, et nous, en tant que jeunes, avec cet esprit d'innovation qu'on a, on peut facilement renforcer la résilience et avoir des plateformes où on peut discuter, avoir des conseils, et c'est en même temps le plaidoyer pour influencer la prise de décision des politiques sur les questions climatiques et santé sexuelle et reproductive. Donc, merci beaucoup. C'est le dernier point de mon intervention. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nuhu, for those points. I love the fact that you mentioned that we need to collaborate. We need to work with the older generation because they know more. We can learn from them. That is what he emphasizes. And the other point he says, to influence policies, we need access to education, of which we can do individually. In short, let us invest in knowing what is happening. Let us get ourselves informed, even on different platforms that we have that are offering different lessons. That is amazing. Thank you so much for highlighting that. All right, that is what we had from our panelists. And now I will request our participants, if anyone has a contribution, comment, or question that they would like to ask, please do raise your hand and you'll be free to speak. Feel free to raise your hand and I'm going to get the first three. I'm trying to check if we have any hands raised. You can direct your question to any of the panelists or you can contribute on what you think you needed to add. So at this point, the participants, you're welcome to participate. Anyone ready to just speak, ask a question, follow up, addition, or give us their own view around reproductive health and climate change? You can give us an example of what is happening. Okay, I see Deborah is going to be first. Anyone else? We can get the first three in that order. But if no one is coming through, we can go ahead. So if you're unable to raise your hand or speak, you can as well utilize the chat box. Just comment in there, we'll be able to see the questions and respond. Okay, so you're allowed to keep coming with your contributions. While we wait, let us have Deborah, Letitia. Deborah, you can go ahead. Good afternoon, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon, how are you? Thank you. I just want to reflect on what the speakers have spoken. And for me, as the person who talked about, the key populations, and in this term, the way like transactional sex and how adults and girls and young women are engaged, I want to still reckon that young people who are in the sex work industry still face a lot of challenges. I'll specifically talk about adults and girls and young women who are in the sex work industry on water bodies, who still experience, challenges of, transportation and how, those spaces get flooded, but then also the lack the lack to access, sexual commodities like condoms and lubricants, but then also the information is still a very big gap. So for me, when I listen to conversations like this talking about, HIV, sexual reproductive health and climate justice, it comes back to me as a person, and I'm like, okay, so there is a category of community that we are living, even when we are still saying, meaningful involvement of all young people in their diversity, in all advocacy platforms. But then I also want to correct us as advocates. The word transactional sex is very, very offensive when it comes to people who are, seeking spaces into advocacy, but also human rights. Recently at the AIDS 2024, we reflected on the UN documents as sex workers. And why we are saying that UN is leaving us behind is because they are using the word transactional sex. We are not doing any work transactionally. We are sex workers, and sex work is a job, and it has to be, decriminalized. So for us as advocates, I call upon us as advocates, let's not defend the word transactional sex. It is literally putting us very off. Why don't we call teachers transactional teachers? Why don't we call nurses transactional nurses? Why do we want to put a spotlight on a certain category of job and penalize, but also criminalize the people in it? Thank you so much to all the speakers and the moderator. Back to you.
Okay, thank you so much for that contribution, Letitia, and your correction. Also in the chat, I can see there is a conversation going on with our teams. Please, let's continue contributing in the chat. Do we have anyone ready to speak? Okay, we have Wellison. I hope I pronounced that correct. Please tell me if I pronounced that correct, and you can go ahead.
I'm called Welisane from Cameroon, and I am at Tina Network Country focal point for the What Girls Want program. I truly resonate with everything the speakers have been able to share, and I just want to add my thoughts and reflections, especially around who's sharing. Coming from Cameroon, where predominantly we have just two seasons, a dry season and a rainy season. Oftentimes, policymakers, civil society organizations, and grassroots organizations are actually waiting, but for the rainy season, particularly to actually approach, and then we start wrapping our heads around intervention strategies to be able to help people in those communities. But then again, just to emphasize, the effects or the consequences are long-term. A family that loses their home to flood, a family that loses their home to maybe heavy rainfall, they tend to become internally displaced persons. They move to new host communities who might not even accept them immediately. They also tend to start getting used to with the community, and then they start getting used to with the health systems and health facilities that are there. And I'm just reflecting, being someone living with HIV, and in that kind of a situation, you move to a new community, you've already been able to deal with stigma and discrimination from the community you're coming from, and then you're starting all over again. And so we are saying that let's not just be able to wait when the emergency happens, when the crisis happens. Let's be able to put in place innovative tools, intervention strategies that can be able to solve most of these problems. Otherwise, we cannot overemphasize on the intersectionality between climate change, sexual reproductive health and rights. There's just so much around it. I think I was attending a session some days back, and one of the speakers was able to share that, young parents are very quick enough to do whatever they can be able to do just to put a roof over their head, just to be able to have something to eat. Poverty too is something that we cannot overlook. And so unless we are able to tackle these issues right from their root causes, we realize that we are only looking for temporary solutions that, for instance, each year there's a rainy season in Cameroon. It means that there are young girls who are continually going to be in danger, and their vulnerabilities keep increasing. I just wanted to share and emphasize on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Walisani, for that. So I'm checking if we have any more contribution, but if not, I would like to request our panelists, starting with Patricia, to just give us maybe 2 recommendations. How best can we as young people see that there's inclusion? You spoke of what is currently happening, how we persons with disabilities are affected, but what recommendations can be there? Just 2 that we need to take away from here so that all the advocates can consider that whenever they're advocating for issues of climate justice and sexual reproductive health, that we need to include them. How best can we do that? So just 2 recommendations, and this question will apply to all our panelists across. So let's start with Patricia. What recommendations would you give? 2.
Okay, well, thank you so much. So I will probably just echo again. To ensure that there is inclusion of persons with disabilities in such conversations, then you have to actually meaningfully involve them, because again, we have been making solutions for this category of people, thinking that it will work for them. But at the end of the day, we end up making solutions that do not work for them because we do not have their contribution. Like I would speak, there is this article that I saw online about an activist for disability, that they're saying that when they introduced plastic straws, that was a bit of a challenge to them because of their disability, they basically take in fluids mostly. And for them, what works for them are the plastic straws. So her argument was that at least if they would have involved us in this conversation, we would have seen how best to come up with probably better straws that meet our needs, not these plastic straws that you put in a drink, and after some time they just become soggy and they can't be used anymore. So that means you have to involve them into these conversations. And again, I would say you can either decide to bring in a representative, but when you bring them in a manner that is respectable and dignified and that you meet their reasonable accommodation, or alternatively, then create a separate group that basically will meet the needs of the diverse groups of persons with disabilities, because the different types of disabilities experience climate change differently. For example, somebody with a physical disability will not have the same experience as somebody who's probably deaf and blind, and somebody else who has neuro disabilities, because there's the aspects of physical accessibility, then there's the aspect of, say, if it's extreme heat, that interaction with the body and the nerves, and therefore you can choose to decide to make it more meaningfully when you bring them into your group, or set it aside just for them to come up with their own solutions that can meet their needs. Yeah, thank you so much, Lady Musanda.
Thank you so much. I have realized my question somehow is going to make the panelists like highlight on a few things that they touched on. So I'm going to switch the question to say, as a panelist and what you're doing, what are you pledging to do to make sure that your recommendation is able to be applied by all those that are watching you? So the question has changed because what we talked about earlier is similar to what the recommendations may be. So what are you pledging? So to just be there watching to say, Patricia, you said this, let's see how many people are going to be doing what you're doing. So we're going to hold each other accountable. It starts here. So pledge for us as an activist in this space. We're talking about inclusivity, and it has to start with us, right? So what are you pledging to do in this advocacy space, especially talking to young people that are living with disabilities? One pledge.
Okay, one pledge. Well, to be more vocal about challenges of persons with disabilities, all the way from academia and to influential positions, because I understand that I'm exposed to these kind of conversations and to these people of high, caliber and of too much resources. So for me, my pledge is to be vocal on these conversations, because I am privileged to be there, and therefore have to speak for the ones who cannot be there or who cannot have the voices up to that point. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I love that. We're going to John, your community engagements. We still have young people that may not be aware of what we are discussing. How do we make sure that majority start to understand what's happening? How are you going to enhance your storytelling? Pledge for us. Give us one pledge of what you're going to do to enhance the storytelling in the community and local level.
Okay, so one pledge is that I'm going to continue engaging with young people through the youth friendly spaces that are already supported by partners, UN agencies, and the Ministry of Health. So that's one of the the platform which I usually utilize and share everything that I learn either when I attend a high-level meeting or a webinar like this. I ensure that I disseminate the information to my fellow young people in my local community. So yeah, but also I'll continue to share online sessions. Like I mentioned, I do share a lot of online sessions on my online platforms. So mostly it's on WhatsApp. I've got a WhatsApp channel which is dedicated to UN SDGs, where I advocate for universal health coverage and sexual reproductive health rights. So I'll continue with the same work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just to throw this to our participants too, because I know majority didn't speak. So I'd like to see comments from the participants also to just tell us one thing they're pledging to do that you've listened to our discussion. What are you pledging to do? Like myself, I would say I pledge to make sure I share this information to the other young people. Can we hear what you're pledging as well while we hear the panelists speak to us? So I'm calling on the participants here, the people that are here from the different countries, to also drop in their pledges in the chat. We see what we are committing to as young people. Let me get to, is it Molly? Molly, what is your pledge as far as engaging using digital platforms? What are you pledging you're going to do? One thing as far as advocating for reproductive health and climate justice.
Sorry, can you repeat your question? Sorry.
Did you request that I repeat the question?
Yes, please. I couldn't hear you.
Okay. I want you to pledge, give us a promise of one thing you're going to do to make sure that this conversation continues and many people hear it around the different digital platforms. This is like personal, something you're going to do to enhance the knowledge amongst young people.
Yeah, thank you. So the most important is that it's quite important that we have this space, and it's really interesting that we have. But what next? And the next is, could we start doing the creative? We can start creating content that is directly talk about these issues, direct to invite people to discuss, to start analyzing the content, because sometimes, of course, that we have the personal thing, we have the personal goals, but sometimes we don't have idea what is happening across the globe. So now it's important that we can start the discussion with the rest of the world. What is happening? What can we do? How can we raise our voices using the digital platform? And the most important, without being creative. The most important is being creative. The most important use the technology, being innovative. And my promise is still creating content, still creating spaces too in every youth organization where you come from. The most important is that keep fighting, because our voice is important. And if we can translate this message to the rest of the young people with inspired message, with inspired quote, or simple, just put a tweet, we can start doing something. And just remember, your voice is really important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So she emphasizes also to just utilize the voice. That's why I'm getting these pledges. I've seen one in the comment section from Malisani. Please, let's keep your pledges coming. We're holding each other accountable as young people. We're talking about inclusion, capacity strengthening, knowledge, information. These are some of the conversations we need to be having. But then to see that majority of young people understand what we're discussing and we are advocating, advocacy should not only happen when you're given a platform, but also at individual level. What are you engaging in? Are you having discussions with your neighbor? Those are pledges we'd like to see. So let's see how many pledges we're going to get from the participants. Unless if you tell me you don't have any, but I don't think there's such a thing. Any will be appreciated. Small, big, just little difference it will make. Let's get Nuhu to give us a pledge, especially that you've got a privilege of attending high-level meetings. We're talking about being a representative. So in your space, how are you promising to make sure that these issues that we're talking about will be represented in the dialogues where you're representing us? one pledge, so that when we know there's COP coming up, COP29 coming up, or any, we'll be sure that this has been discussed through the representative. No, over to you.
Okay, thank you. After last year was my first COP, and it was very difficult for me to navigate, to advocate. Even I got parties, but it was difficult for me because it was my first time. So for this year, for me, it's to try to bridge this gap of knowledge. So I'm now trying to build my capacities in terms of negotiation, in terms of understanding the intersectionality between climate and SRHR. And what we are also doing here in my country as youth-led organization, we are trying to push, still advocating, and trying to find mechanism for how we can try to have youth represented in climate spaces. So in terms of policies, decision making. So we are still advocating in this kind of spaces. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Nuhul. So before was like, okay, just getting to understand. Now, yeah, ready to face the many participants there. Yes, this is what I'm looking for. So I would like to hear your different pledges. And I've seen, let me just read through what we have from Welisani. She says, I pledge to amplify information and knowledge about the intersectionality of climate justice and sexual reproductive health for adolescent girls and young women in Cameroon, calling for stakeholders to address these issues. Thank you so much. And then we have Yvonne, who's 6 years old from Kenya, saying, as an active member of Youths of Hope, we have WhatsApp group where we share daily on issues we encounter on our daily basis as individuals living with HIV. I pledge to keep them on the know and have to get to know the advocacy issues that we're talking about and be a part of it. Great. And we have Burundi in the house, Ravel, saying, I pledge for youth engagement and inclusiveness in policy implementation in Burundi. Okay, thank you so much. Do we have any comments? I know Shanice shared a link that we all can look at for you to follow our social media platforms. Shanice has shared something, but maybe Shanice are able to reshare that link so that you follow us on our social media platforms. And I would just like to remind you all that this is a series. So this is not the first or the last. It happens to be the second campaign that we're having, which is called the Advocacy Amplified Series. It's the second one. So be on the lookout for the next one that we're going to be having. Remember that all these discussions are also coming from us young people. And thanks to the steering committee that thought we need to involve young people and also discuss the issues that they want to talk about. So basically, that is what it is. Do not think this is the last conversation, but we'll continue having more. Shanice, are you able to share the link again? And also, if you're joining this conversation for the first time, you have no idea about United Movement, there's actually membership that you can fill in. Let me assist in sending that link. Become a member of United so that you're able to learn, also share what you're doing, because at the end of the day, we are united. So before we can conclude with everything, may I kindly request that we all turn on our videos and do our united symbol. United is basically you lift your fist like that. It's a reminder that we're together, we're united, and we're strong, I guess. But I like to see our videos where you just do your hands fist up, we get a picture, and that is united symbol. So may I kindly start seeing our beautiful faces with a fist like that? We get a picture. So yeah, it's a reminder we are united. I'm gonna ask Marietta to kindly help take a screenshot for us. Perfect. Yeah, so make sure you smile. Make it as bright as you can so that people can notice you once we put on our social media platforms. Everyone, are we there? Yes, I see beautiful smiles coming in. Thank you. So, yes, yes. Are we there? Elvis, Eric, Muelwa. I love calling out names. Sorry, but I just want to make sure you all are on this beautiful picture. So 1, 2, 3, you smile. Okay, are we good? Faith, are we winning?
I'm waiting for more cameras to go on so that I can capture the picture.
Okay. So
But
let's go.
let's not force people. Maybe they're not comfortable.
That's okay.
I'm capturing.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay.
No, wait.
Marietta, are we winning? Because I know we have 2 people here to take pictures. In case of cases, maybe I will smile better on the other one. Okay. Are you there?
I hope Marietta has captured this because
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for turning on your video and for just being part of this discussion. Thank you so much to the speaker and the panelists. I've shared the membership form, and do follow us on our social media platforms so that you'll be engaging with us. United is the place you want to be, because it is not only about our conveners, Afrian and Y Plus Global, or our funders, the supporters, the UN agencies. It's all about us. We literally drive the whole agenda of United. So here is where you get your capacity strengthened. Here's where you get to learn different aspects of life, different advocacy issues. It's just an empowering space for young people. And remember to share the links to other young people so that indeed we'll be united around ISA region, that is Eastern and Southern region. Otherwise, allow me to appreciate you all once more, and our interpreters for being here with us. Thank you so much. We had interpreters for French and Portuguese for being here with us. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And have a lovely weekend ahead. I know tomorrow is Friday. In Zambia, we say Friday ya kusansamuka. That means just dance, just be happy. Yeah, so thank you. And I hope we'll share the information that we've learned here. Let us keep the fire burning and let us continue being advocates. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye for now. Those that want to turn on the video to say hello, it's fine. We can just interact while others are going now. It's okay. Yeah.